Hello and welcome to Drive-In Double Feature Podcast. I'm Nathan.
I'm Ryan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about 2 movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before we start this week, I want to talk about our Patreon over at patreon.com/Drive-In Double Feature Podcast. We do so many bonus episodes over there, and you got to check it out. If you haven't checked it out yet, it's loaded with tons and tons of fun content that you're missing out on. So, and if you do pay, thank you. Thank you for that. But let's get in this week's first movie. It's Bondzilla week, and we're talking about A View to a Kill. It's Roger Moore's last James Bond. John Glen is the director, and this is his third James Bond, and not his last as well. And yeah, we're ending James Bond. We're ending Roger Moore in 1985, right dead in the middle of the 80s. And I always ask this, but Ryan, have you seen this one before?
No,
neither have I.
So
Cool.
I've been well aware of it for a long time, because usually when people talk about like the worst of the Eon Bond movies, this one's usually brought up.
I was I was surprised because I hear about this one all the time. Like, I hear about the villain, I hear about Grace Jones, I hear about like the bridge scenes, and I'm like, okay, this is one of the more interesting ones. And then on Letterboxd, it has one of the lowest averages out of all of the Bond movies.
Well, as you know, we take Rotten Tomatoes as gospel, and
yes, of course.
It has a 37% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow, that is just like destroying it. And I mean, I'll be honest, what I see a lot of negativity towards is just how old Roger Moore is, and we've talked about this through all of these movies, that Roger Moore is getting progressively older. And I'm pretty sure he's gotten work before this movie, and it doesn't help him at all. He is definitely looking like an old James Bond. But I don't want to be too negative on it, because I do think if you're a good Bond and you're older, I think you can make it work. Kind of like Sean Connery in Never Say Never Again. I think if you're old, as long as you can play it well, that's what matters.
Well, I mean, with him being old and Never Say Never Again, that was a plot point.
Yes, that's true.
So I think that actually worked in its favor, to be quite honest. And I don't want to beat up somebody for their appearance either, but I made the joke to you. I was like Sean Connery looks better in Never Say Never Again.
It's true.
Roger Moore does in A View to a Kill. I mean, he just there's like one scene where he's underwater, and you could really see like everything on him underwater, and it just he's showing his age, I'll say that.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And it's not only on looks, it's by stunt doubles. And I don't know that this is not even getting far into the movie, you can tell right off the bat when I started this movie, there's a ski sequence. Yes, another James Bond ski sequence.
I was just saying, man, we've never seen James Bond ski in the opening before.
Yeah, it's never happened. And it's just like, okay, I guess we're doing this again. It's another cold one. But we see Roger Moore skiing, and I want to say 70% of this, maybe even more, there is no Roger Moore shots. And you can blatantly tell that it is a stunt double doing almost all of this.
You mean for the whole movie, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And this kid carries on for the full movie. This is where his age really shows, I think, is just that he can't even do small stunts, and he has stunt doubles doing everything.
There's one scene where he's driving a car that's been chopped in half.
Yes.
And they get really close on the stunt double's face, and it doesn't even look kind of like Roger Moore. And I'm just like...
And he has like a bad wig too.
Yeah, and it's very, very noticeable. And, I'm almost surprised he didn't get like a stunt double, like when he's running up those stairs in the Eiffel Tower.
I wouldn't be surprised if he did have one. I don't know. It's weird.
He's 55 at this point, so yes, he's not young, but
Yeah. And I mean, he's definitely old. And but I mean, like he's just Bond at this point. He's been Bond for 6 movies before this, and I mean this is his last outing. But it's kind of like Sean Connery. I'm sure Eon there was just like, well, he works, so why don't we just keep going with what works?
Yeah, I mean, Diamonds Are Forever. I mean, Sean Connery wasn't looking great in that one, which is weird
No,
because he almost looked better, like
yeah,
10 years later or whatever. So
it's true.
it, if anything has taught me anything about this series, it's just how much more I appreciate Roger Moore for.
But I think Roger Moore is a pretty underrated Bond. I mean, once
Well,
we move on, I
well,
don't.
I don't know if he's underrated.
You don't think so? I think people really crap on him.
You think so? I always feel like it's always for me it's always I feel like it's always 50-50. People are always
Okay,
like Sean Connery or Roger Moore. I mean,
really?
I think he's rated. I'll say that.
Okay, okay. Um, I don't know. I guess to me, maybe it's just because a lot of his movies aren't stellar, right? I think that's a part of it. He has good movies, but he ends up being in some of the worst movies of the bunch. And maybe that doesn't help him at all. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he gets ragged on a lot, but I just he plays Bond as a very different character
That's
than
true.
Sean Connery did. I mean, Sean Connery, was definitely a lot more of a ladies man type of thing, or
Mhm.
Bond was, I don't want to say tougher, but maybe a little more brutish, maybe is what I'm thinking of.
Mhm.
And then, but Roger Moore, is very classy, very witty type of
Mhm.
guy. Bond's a much more lighter character,
Yeah.
it seemed it seems like they were really trying to soften Bond a little bit, I would say, and that's not
Yeah.
necessarily a bad thing. But I think when you do some of that, though, I think they took it a little too far in certain directions.
Mhm.
Um, and this movie has a couple of those moments, but none of some of the heights that we've seen before, though, I will say.
Yeah, no, definitely not. It definitely it's not the silliest of the bunch, but it does camp. It's a campy one. Don't get me wrong. Especially when that skiing sequence ends and he slides into the floating drivable iceberg and
Yeah,
he sleeps with the woman driving it, of course.
yeah,
Um
of course.
of
I
course, of
mean,
course.
they're little goofy stuff like that where I was just
Mhm.
like, okay, like,
But I guess moving into the movie, we do have to talk about the title sequence right at the beginning, which has Duran Duran's "A View to a Kill," which is probably one of the biggest Bond hits as far as like pop hits go, and and it's really nice. It's really refreshing. I will say that because I really liked For Your Eyes Only, but it has been a bunch of ballads recently, and it's nice to have something a bit louder, a little more poppy, and it's an amazing song. It's a really great song.
right. I would definitely agree. I mean, so far it's been a lot of love type of ballads going in,
Mhm.
and as good as the other songs were, it never really, even though we were well into the 80s at this point, it never felt like Bond was in the 80s. It was almost like he
Yeah.
was at this tail end of the 70s and wasn't letting go of the
Mhm.
70s, like love ballads. But now it's with that song, A View to a Kill, it's a lot more energetic. It actually feels like an 80s song.
Mhm.
Um, and probably like one of my not talking about the song, but probably one of my favorite opening sequences in the
Yeah,
movie.
it's a great one. Yeah, which is nice because if I remember right, some of the last ones have been pretty bad. And this one's like it's very 80s. It's a bunch of women like half naked, of course, and they're painted with like neon paint and it has like neon colors and it's kind of like ice versus fire. There's like flames and ice. Even though snow and ice doesn't really take part in the rest of the movie, but it's still a pretty fun setup.
Yeah, definitely. And as far as the song goes, this is actually one of my favorite
Oh yeah.
Bond
It
songs.
ranks
I mean,
high.
it uh, we'll have to do a final ranking at the very end for Bond songs, but it's for me, it's pretty high up there. It's one that I like to listen in my personal time too.
You listen to a Bond theme on your personal time?
No, I swear. Never mind.
Yeah,
Forget I
okay,
said
yeah,
that.
come on, yeah, just cut it out. No, because the Hollywood Foreign Press was was listening to this in their personal time because they nominated it for best original song um, at the
And
Golden
they
Globes.
finally they put a seal on quality.
As they always do, the Golden Globes are always the highest quality. Um, but yeah, so then we actually get into the plot of this movie. And once again, it kind of we're moving a little bit more into the 80s because we're talking about things like Silicon Valley, microchips. It's a little more about the computer age, which I think is fun because what Bond picks up off of that skier is a microchip that is protected, that won't be taken out by like electromagnets or anything quite like that. And it all goes back to Max Zorin, who is our main villain in this movie, played by Christopher Walken. And this is who I know of. Like this movie, like anybody really talks about it, it's Max Zorin and him. Yeah, it's Christopher Walken. And he's hamming it up and he's having a good time. It's kind of up there with like Christopher Lee, where it's just like a really fun actor playing our villain.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like some of the other uh, like main bad guys of the series, we've had some pretty weak ones in the past.
Yeah.
But this one, I really liked Christopher Walken in
Oh
this
yeah.
movie.
Yeah, me too. I think he's great. I actually, if there was one ding I would give this movie, there isn't enough Christopher Walken. I would have loved to have seen even more of him.
There's one scene, this is getting way into it, but
Mm-hmm.
they Christopher Walken's got them cornered and he's like capturing them, and uh I forget what the girl's name is. Stacy.
Yeah,
Stacy.
another Stacy.
Yeah, like she's like, "Oh, you have to let us go, Max," and he's like, "Don't worry. He's a psychopath."
Yeah,
And
I love that.
he's just like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he says things that don't make sense. Once again, way later in the movie, Bond is like, "Oh, you killed Tibbet, who's a character we'll talk about later, or you made a mistake when you killed Tibbet." And Christopher Walken says, "I'll make that mistake again." And it's like it
Yeah.
kind of doesn't make sense, but also it's like it's funny anyway. No, and he's full of stuff like that. But he's like a huge microchip chip developer, and he loves horses too. This is another Bond movie that has the setting of horse races or has something to do with horses. A lot of Bond tropes coming back into this one, huh? I guess
I
it's
mean,
the last hurrah.
a little bit, yeah. And
Um,
they the well, they don't reveal what the evil plot is until
mhm.
after the horse races, but at first it's like this big like, oh, he's running illegal horse races. Like he's
Yeah.
illegally injecting these horses with horse steroids.
Yep, that's the big deal is that he's injecting horse steroids, but it goes so much deeper. And let me tell you, it is holy crap. The plot to this one is silly. Because like Bond, he's infiltrating the horse thing, and there's like it's like an ex-Nazi. We don't really know this yet, but he has like the monocle, and he looks really evil. And he's just talking, having a good time, and come to find out, this guy was a scientist who was genetically engineering babies to be highly intelligent. Most of those babies died, but yeah, just some insane plot. And I guess
And
does it specifically say Max Zorin was one of these babies, or is it just kind of hint at it?
they suggest it's like Bond says, and Max is one of these children, and they're like, oh, we don't know for sure. And but then because they say when they're mentioning these babies, they're like, one side effect is they're completely psychopathic, and
Yeah.
and and then Bond later is like, don't bother reasoning with him. He is a psychopath. So he's implying that he was one of those kids, and
Mhm.
Walken doesn't correct him there. So
No, he's like, yeah, that's me. And I mean, it would be right if he was a psychopath and he was just very open about it. And we got to talk about the main bad Bond girl here, played by Grace Jones. Her name is Mayday, which isn't a great name, but I love her introduction because I just thought it was a little funny. They're at the horse races and Bond is like looking through his binoculars. He's like, "Who's that in the red dress?" And then the guy he's with is like, "Who are you talking about?" And has to look around for this lady who like obviously stands out in the crowd.
she's got a ton of makeup on her face, and she's got like these red streaks painted under her face, and it's just like,
Yeah.
who's this
Who?
inconspicuous woman that I cannot point her out in this crowd. But
Yeah, I
uh
don't know. That made me laugh.
uh I like Grace Jones in this one too.
Oh, she's great.
I thought she was a great villain. She really stands out, very unique compared
Mhm.
to all the other villains we've seen up until now. Because usually it's just like big dude that that's unstoppable or something, and now
Mhm.
this one it's like really strong woman that has like superhuman strength.
Yeah, exactly. I think she just brings like something fun to this, especially when you get to the end of the movie. I was really surprised by it. They have a really weird moment. How did you feel about the scene where Christopher Walken and like Mayday are like training alone together and they're like wrestling, trying to force a kiss on each other? I didn't know what I was supposed to get out of that scene. That was really odd.
I guess it's just showing that they're lovers, I
Yeah,
suppose.
they
But
they have love and they love in a very weird way. Not judging, not judging.
well, they do specify that that's his lover. They're like, oh yeah,
Yes,
Mayday
yeah, they
is
do say
lover.
that.
So
Yeah.
so that is the case. But he basically tells Mayday to go sleep with Bond at one point, though. So Bond
Yes.
does sleep with Grace Jones in this movie.
Yeah, and that once again, Bond here is looking so old that the sex scene is just I don't know, it's odd, I guess.
Well, I mean, so usually what we see is, this is me getting a little like specific. Like, usually like in Bond movies, he starts having relations with women. He's like
Hmm.
starts kissing and Bond kind of gets on top of them, like in a way. And then this one, it's like she's just like, no, like me get on top. So
Yeah, and he looks confused.
he's just
Uh,
like, oh, this is new.
yeah, Roger Moore still is good with face stuff. Like I think like his facial acting, he's still really fun. He does some goofy faces.
One of my favorite faces he makes is actually an octopusy when she's like, oh, that's just my little octopusy. And then he's just like so confused.
Yeah,
Like, what did you just
yeah,
say?
and it's touches like that that make him feel human. Because like you were talking about comparing him and Sean Connery, is Sean Connery wouldn't really react like that. He'd be like, "Oh yes," like just
He's
like
like,
yeah,
I would like the sound of that. Just
yeah. But Roger Moore is just kind of like, "Huh?" This is a little silly.
and then well, I mean, because even when he arrives at the horse ranch, there's like a woman. She's like, "Hi, I'm Jenny Flex," and he's like, "Yeah, yes, of course you are."
Yeah, and then they have that long like conversations like, "Oh, so you like riding?" "Yeah, I ride in the saddle every morning," and just like an innuendo fight back and forth.
Yeah,
um
I want to see like a Bond that he doesn't speak in innuendos. He just speaks in like, it's like, "Oh, I'm going to have sex with you now."
yeah, he hears the name Octopussy and he's like, "Okay, all right, nice to meet you, Miss Octo."
Yeah. Um, but I wanted to mention too, like there was actually some pretty impressive stunts in this movie, and
Hmm.
I actually watched the behind the scenes of
You
A View to
did?
a Kill.
Cool.
Yeah, they actually do some really impressive stunts in this movie where they actually parachute off of the Eiffel Tower, which they
Hmm.
did do for real.
Oh wow.
Um, so they had to get really special permission to do that stunt, and they had to get it just right because, as you know, the Eiffel Tower starts out very narrow at the top, and then it gets wider as it goes
Hmm.
down. So they said that the jumper had about 3.5 seconds
Mm-hmm.
from jumping to pulling the cord before he would have hit metal
Oh,
girders.
holy crap. That's it's so dangerous. And people have been hurt on these movies before.
Yeah, and so the funny story about this is though is that the jumper they did it in one take. Cubby Broccoli and the director like perfect. Don't need to do that again. But they actually had like a backup jumper,
Mm-hmm.
like that wanted to do the jump really bad. Or like he said, I want to jump, and he's like, I'll do it for free. Just let me jump.
Oh my
Like,
God.
and but they're like, they said rightfully so. They're like, no, like there's no reason to take an unnecessary risk if we
Mm-hmm.
don't have to. But because they had to get really special permission, like it took a really long time
Mm-hmm.
to get permission to jump off of the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
And they said the guy said that he went back to the Eiffel Tower like early in the morning and jumped off the Eiffel Tower and did that jump himself.
Oh wow.
And but the director John Glen was actually there with a crew, like doing pickup shots and like picking out like correct camera angles for like the
Yeah.
later chase scene. And they're just like, what the hell type of thing. And then that guy got fired from the movie, and he was never allowed to work on Bond movies ever again.
He probably was like kicked out of like out of a lot of movies over a stunt like that.
He said they interviewed him, and he was just like, "It's like, yeah, I get calls from stuntmen all the time, like, hey, thanks for jumping off the Eiffel Tower, and now I get to go work on Bond movies."
That's funny.
Yeah,
He really wanted to do it that bad. I mean, like that is a once in a lifetime chance to do something like that.
yeah, but very stupid at the same time.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Uh, but that does lead to a pretty fun chase sequence where Bond is chasing Grace Jones, and she
Mm-hmm.
jumps onto a boat, and then he jumps onto the boat. Like he's driving around this car that gets chopped in half, and
Mm-hmm.
it just has the front half of the car.
Yeah, well, I like it because like the car slowly loses its hood, then it loses the back of the car and everything. And yeah, I agree. That is a pretty fun chase sequence.
And jumps into the a wedding cake.
Yeah, obviously not him for most of this movie until he hands the cake back, of course.
Yeah,
But she ends up getting away, and honestly, this chase doesn't really matter. Except for later, I guess she notices him. She's like, "Oh, he's the guy at the Eiffel Tower." But Grace Jones notices this way late in this movie.
yeah. Well, he says he's Saint John Smythe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people kept calling him Smith. No, it's Smythe. And he has multiple, like, because doesn't he? What's his like reporter name? John.
James
Yeah,
Stockwell or
yeah,
John Stock.
James Stock, I think, New London reporter.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's a reporter because he says that to Stacy,
mhm.
and he's like, I'm a reporter, and then he just starts, and then like in the next breath, like he's using like a machine gun to like gun
Mhm.
down some guys. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, that's what reporters do. And we should say that the Bond girl in this one is played by Tanya Roberts,
Hmm.
uh, who you might recognize either from Charlie's Angels, or if you are a millennial like me, you probably noticed that she was in that '70s show as Midge, or Donna's mom. So,
Yeah.
so I've got to say she's one of the parts I didn't like in
No,
this
yeah.
movie.
If it's not apparent, I actually really liked this one. I was surprised at how much I liked it, but she's probably the weakest part. One of the weaker Bond girls. Not that she's not the weakest.
No,
She's fine. She's more boring. I kind of just like forgot about her.
she doesn't really have any defining characteristics.
Yeah. Like and like she gets really annoying at the end of the movie because like there's this one scene where Bond is escaping on a burning elevator and she's screaming at the top of her lungs. She's like, Bond, get back here, Bond. And like I was just like, oh, this is grating. I was wearing headphones and it was killing me.
Well, yeah, because James is trying to get out of the elevator to
Hmm.
save both of them, and she's thinking like he just left her. It's like, James, where are you going? James, help me. And
Yeah.
he's like, and I want to be like, he's getting a hose. Just
Yeah,
calm down.
he's trying to help you. He's not leaving you. Yeah, yeah, it seems like that. Like I can't even like really point out anything really substantial about her. Like really, she kind of connects the plot between Max Zorin's like evil plot, and then at the end of the movie she gets kidnapped and kind of makes it so Bond has to save her. Continues a little bit at the end of the movie.
Well, yeah, the main thing is that he originally you're supposed to think that she's in on it with Max Zorin because
Hmm.
Max Zorin wrote her a check for $5 million,
Hmm.
and it's this whole big plot. Like her dad runs like a big oil company, and she didn't want anything to do with Max Zorin, so that's why I was like, oh well, she's actually a good guy. So
Yes.
it all worked out, and um, they do travel to America eventually,
Hmm.
and they go to San Francisco.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where like the rest of this movie takes place, right? Is actually in like San Francisco. Because the whole plot, I mean, this kind of gets revealed a little later, but it's Silicon Valley. That's Max Zorin's thing because he produces microchips. What he wants to do, he has a mine that's pumping in seawater, and he's going to blow up the mine so all the seawater ends up in Silicon Valley, flooding it, getting rid of that microchip production, and making him the leader. That's his big plan. What a weird plan. Kind of like it though. It's at least interesting. It's something different.
Yeah, it's a lot different than, oh, they're kidnapping Soviet spies and British
Mm,
spies, or they stole
yeah.
a sub, they stole a rocket ship.
Yeah.
It's
But of course, Soviet spies do show up in this one. The KGB is here. Don't worry if you they didn't get rid of it yet.
and there's a cameo too in this movie. One of the KGB agents is played by
Mhm.
Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, yeah. And he was dating Grace Jones at that time.
What a couple!
What a couple. Yeah.
But
With,
that this part has like one of the most sillier moments of the movie where
mhm,
because Max Zorin, they think he's killed Bond by drowning him in a lake
mhm.
with his oh, we didn't mention with Tibbet.
Oh
And
yeah, which we don't have to go too deep into, but I love those scenes because Tibbet has to pretend to be his chauffeur and Bond is just bossing him around. It's actually really good.
and they mentioned that in the behind the scenes too, because actually Bond and him are old friends, like
Mm,
the actor playing him. And they mentioned like, oh yeah, like they were old friends, and a lot of that was ad lib scenes where it's like Roger Moore was like come on Tibbet, like hurry up now, don't make me fire you. Like that was a lot of that was ad lib because he was
okay.
intentionally trying to give him a hard time with that whole bit.
Hmm.
But yeah, they Max Zorin thinks that he kills Bond, and he tells the KGB because it turns out Max Zorin is a KGB agent,
Hmm.
and KGB is like, who gave you authorization to murder Bond? Like, this is going to set back our relations with the UK by a lot. This is going to cause us a big trouble. And it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm not a part of the KGB anymore. And then,
Wow.
and Grace Jones picks up one of the KGB agents like she's a pro wrestler and like military presses him, like, ah.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I kind of love it because Max Zorin here just can't be trusted by anybody. Because by the time we get to the end of the movie, which takes place in this mine shaft, and I'll be honest, at first I was like, "Oh, the climax of this movie's in a mine. That's kind of boring." And the more I looked at it, though, the more I liked it. Actually, I kind of like the setup. I like that it fills up with water, and because Max Zorin sets up this whole thing to go explosives. He's got to leave, but he just takes a gun and he just mows down all of his men. He betrays everybody and just shoots everybody. It's really messed up.
Well, yeah, and there's a point where Grace Jones falls down into like the water below,
Hmm.
and they're like, "Aren't you going to pull up Mayday?" He's like, "No," and just like, "I'm gonna let her die."
Yeah, and this is what I liked about Mayday because Mayday takes this as like, oh wow, you really screwed me over, and her and Bond team up.
Yeah, so there's like a scene where it's like Roger Moore and Grace Jones just like battling like to get out of there.
Yeah.
Um, she unfortunately meets her demise, but
yeah, but it's really cool because she has to. They put like the explosives on the cart that she has to be on in order to make sure it doesn't blow up the mine, and she rides off, and it's a really cool scene of her looking up the blimp and Max looking back down at her, and she just blows up. She sacrifices herself. I thought it was a pretty well shot scene.
yeah, I like that scene. There's one scene beforehand I wanted to make sure I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, which actually you mentioned the elevator shaft scene.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I actually kind of like the plot point of like them at the mayor's office, like trying
Okay, yeah.
to go after Max Zorin, and they're breaking into the office, but Max Zorin like ends up murdering that one, like one of the commission. I forget, it wasn't the mayor he murdered, but it was
Somebody.
Howe was his last name, but it was Stacy Sutton's like boss or whatever, because she's like, remember she tried to go
Yeah.
report Max Zorn's like, they fired me.
Yeah, they would like fire her on the spot.
Yeah, and anyway, that turns into like to a whole big kerfuffle. But there's like a scene where Bond is actually wanted by the police, and the police are
Mhm.
chasing after him, and there's like a bridge scene, like the bridge is opening up, and these cop cars just get totally trashed.
Yeah, no, I thought this scene was pretty fun. It was just like a fun little car chase scene on the firefighter, and like and it had like the bridge going up and the car dangling on the side and it falls down. I always like car destruction stunts, so that was good fun. And of course the
Yeah,
idiot cops. Gotta love those.
I know. We need to get that sheriff back though from Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah, not he wasn't just in Man with the Golden Gun,
Uh,
right?
you know,
Sergeant Pepper.
yeah, he was in that, and oh god, was he in?
He was in Live and Let Die.
Okay, and then Man with the Golden Gun. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
One of the
Let's
weird
get.
times we have a reoccurring character, like a smaller reoccurring character.
Yeah, we needed to get him. He could have been like on transfer in San Francisco. Like he's like,
Oh,
oh, I'm here to show y'all how we do things down south or
but
whatever.
but what's so funny is by the end of Man with the Golden Gun, he's like buddies with James Bond. He's
Oh
like,
yeah.
I'm your biggest fan.
Well, yeah. He's like, you're that secret agent, James Bond.
Yeah, one of the best bits in these movies.
Right, but no, that was just I just wanted to mention that scene.
Yeah.
But we get towards the real climax of the movie, which actually takes
Mm-hmm.
place on the Golden Gate Bridge,
Mm-hmm.
and that scene, they were talking about that in the behind the scenes as well. So
Mm-hmm.
when they were actually doing location scouting, they actually went to the Golden Gate Bridge, um, and they had the scene with the blimp. Like the Zoran blimp is actually like a very big plot point in this movie, like a
Yes,
setting.
yeah.
And
That's where he name drops the movie.
oh yeah, that's right.
It's really bad. Where she's like, Grace Jones is like, "Oh, what a nice view to a kill." It's so bad.
But the scene, they were doing location scouting, and they had their camera with them, and some of these shots show up in the movie where like the Fuji film
Mm.
blimp was actually flying above the Golden Gate Bridge, so they took a video of that, and they're like, huh, that'd be pretty interesting to put a blimp and like flying over the Golden Gate Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So they the Zorin blimp, they modeled it closely after the Fuji blimp, so that
Oh,
way
that's cool.
it could kind of match that. And also too, they're fighting at the very top of the Golden Gate Bridge, and they had to recreate and build like the top half of the Golden Gate Bridge, so that way they could recreate some of those
Yeah,
scenes.
I was wondering how they did it, and I mean, it looks pretty good in my opinion. I actually really like this scene.
Yeah, I mean, there's one scene too. There is one real shot where there are some stunt people like
Mm.
actually walking on the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's one thing they said. The mayor at the time, which was Dianne Feinstein, uh, actually was a huge fan of James Bond and pretty much gave them permission to do whatever they wanted in San Francisco.
That's
And they
cool.
made there was a funny bit in there where Roger Moore's like, "Well, thankfully she liked me over Sean."
I like
so
that.
so that was just one bit in the movie, but there's some pretty cheesy moments though. There's one bit where Stacy is running and the blimp sneaks up behind her, like
and
she's like,
picks her up.
she's running, and Bond is like, Trace or Stacy, look out, and she's like, huh? Like there's a
A
blimp
giant
behind.
blimp. I'm pretty sure. I don't. I've never been near a blimp, but I'm pretty sure they're extremely loud.
Well, yeah, they have those giant fans that keep them like, or you'd hear it coming.
She's just partially deaf. I don't know.
That'd be
you
pretty
you
interesting. Like the first Deaf Bond girl.
you have your AirPods in. Watch out, the
And
blimp's behind you.
yeah, like in the 80s. Oh no, she's got a Walkman in.
I think that'd be pretty good. But yeah, the blimp scene is pretty silly, but I don't know. It's like a fun like set piece, and I think some of it looks really good. You got the guys fighting, and the blimp explodes because the Nazi dude that is there and has like dynamite in his hand.
Right.
So goofy.
Well, there's some other really bad bits. Like there's one bit where I think it's when Max Zorn gets thrown into, or no, it's when Max Zorn throws like one of the when he's holding like his big like exposition, like I'm telling everybody what my evil plot is, and he's trying to, and one guy's like, you're crazy for doing this, and he throws him out, and there's like, it's very clearly like a dummy because the arms and legs are dangling.
It's like like wobbling.
Like yeah, and just doesn't look real at all. And I think that even happens to Christopher Walken when he gets thrown off the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, I think it looks exactly the same, like a dummy.
Like they just threw a dummy off the yeah. So
which is funny because these movies have huge budgets.
Yeah, they couldn't just pay somebody to just jump off the Golden Gate Bridge.
That you just get the guy who jumped off the Eiffel Tower for free.
Yeah. Okay, we got one really good stunt for you, and just
no parachute or nothing.
Yeah, you'll really love this. But I think one of the biggest knocks about this movie, because I've heard like other people compare this I've heard multiple times that this is the worst Bond movie, or like one of the worst Bond movies. And honestly, I think, and like you said, the criticism is that Roger Moore's too old. There's a lot of ridiculous moments in this movie, a lot of silly moments, and sitting here and watching these movies back to back like this, I'm like, I was waiting for like something like outrageously silly, like just like like I was waiting for that, and watching it, I'm like, this is no more ridiculous than any of the other Bond movies.
No, I agree. If anything, it's a little. I mean, of course, the blimp, Golden Tower, or sorry, the Golden Gate Bridge. That's all goofy. But I've seen a few other things in a couple. He went to space, guys, a couple of movies ago. Like that's on another level. I don't know.
He went to space. They did like the rolling car scene with the slide whistle.
Oh God. Oh well, we didn't talk about, they ruined the skiing stunt with the California Girls cover, whatever the hell that was.
Oh God, what was that?
I don't know. It made no sense. Why did they play the Beach Boys? Well, it was like a cover of the Beach Boys. It wasn't even like the real song.
Well, I think they said it because he was using, I guess, a snowboard, and he was like gliding on the water with it, so it kind of looked like he was surfing.
The new Surfing USA.
I don't know, but that was one dumb bit. I will say that. But
yes, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But no, I just was thinking like to me, it's like it has a very solid bad guy. I mean, there's no one overly bad in this movie. I mean, it's got a very memorable henchman. It's got a great theme song. The plot, like I said, is no more ridiculous than some of the other ones. Like, I mean, Goldfinger, for God's sakes, it's like they have a secret military base in like Oklahoma, or like in Tennessee or whatever, like that nobody's aware of. So to me, it's like it's just on par with all the other ones in terms of its outrageousness, and I don't really see anything overly bad in this that would warrant it to be the worst Bond movie.
No, and I don't think I mean, of course, does it rank as one of the best? No, I'd probably put it somewhere in the middle though. I think it's actually a pretty solid Bond movie. It's fun. There's especially one other one Roger Moore has done that I would return to this over that. I'd actually return to A View to a Kill. Like that's a sign of a good Bond movie to me. When I finish it, would I rewatch it? Yeah, I'd actually really enjoy a rewatch of this one.
Yeah, and I think we both have our rankings that we're going to talk about here pretty soon. But
Yeah.
I like I said, I don't think it's the worst movie. Definitely not even the worst Roger Moore movie either. I mean,
No.
there's going to be some ones that I mean, there's some that's just like real like dull, like that we've
Mm-hmm.
seen, where it's just a lot of the same, like nothing too interesting. So I would definitely rank this one above a lot of the other ones I've seen. But honestly, I would give this movie a recommend. There's nothing, if you're a fan of the Bond movies, I mean, there's nothing in here that would make me turn my head. And honestly, that would make me so like, don't watch this movie. It's, like I said, it's a pretty solid Bond movie.
Yeah, it's a fun Bond movie. Exactly. And it's a good time. It's got the right amount of camp. It's silly, and I think it's a pretty good send off for Roger Moore. I really do. I think it's like the right tone for him, and um, I feel like it's a good way to end things. Other than him looking so old, this is definitely where they needed to stop.
Yeah, and they bring that up in the documentary, and they even say that this was Roger Moore's decision. Like this was not Cubby Broccoli's decision,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm like, it's like, so if Roger Moore didn't say this, that's enough, he would probably
Probably
still at least done like the next one or two afterwards. I think like for the
the
ones that
Living Daylights with
in
Roger
license,
Moore.
it could have been a real thing. It could have very been a real thing.
It
So
could have.
because the way they were describing it, he was just like Roger decided that was his decision. He didn't want to do it anymore. And Roger Moore had even said that this was, like, oh, well, when the Bond girls are the same age as your mother was when you started doing Bond, that's when it's becoming a problem. And,
Yeah.
or he's like, when they're having to get guys that look realistic that I beat up in these movies, that's when it's
Yeah.
time to hang it up.
And he is beating up like older people in this movie.
So I think it was definitely the right call. But I do think it's funny that if he hadn't said no, that we could have potentially seen like another movie or two with him in it.
Yeah, who knows how long they would have gone on for, but yeah.
Uh, but
I
like going back to what I said before, it gave me a much more appreciation for Roger Moore.
mhm.
I'm not sure where he ranks as one of my favorite Bonds, but I definitely like him a lot more than I thought I did. I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's going to end up ranking a little higher for me. I mean, of course, as of right now, he is number 2 to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sean Connery is better though.
George Lazenby's not number one.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to take that much of a of a. Oh yeah, well, George Lazenby was actually the best Bond guy. He was good though. I like some Lazenby.
If I would have liked, this is a side rant, but I probably would have liked him a lot more had he done more movies.
Yeah, because don't they talk about that in the behind the scenes where it's like, I really wish he would have gone on to do a couple more movies because he really could have like just gotten his acting skills up and really fell into that role.
Yeah, that's pretty much what everyone says, and even he said that like that was one of his regrets is that he didn't do more Bond movies. So
Yeah, that's a huge regret, man.
so I, but that's a big what if.
Yes, yeah.
So, um, but like I said, Roger Moore, thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you for on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
But Nathan, will Bond return?
Bond will return in the living daylights. But
Perfect.
before we even get into that, we gotta rank these guys, right? But
Yep,
we
we
can do
do.
it kind of quickly.
Uh-huh.
What is the worst Bond? We'll start from bottom to top, and I'll go with mine. I want to say we might have the same one. For Your Eyes Only is my least favorite.
Uh,
Is it
yeah,
Moonraker?
no,
No,
no.
okay.
Um, Yeah, I would agree with that. It was between that and another one. For Your Eyes Only, for me, it was just pretty boring.
I
I
agree.
think
Yeah.
I really having a tough time remember stuff from that happened in the movie.
Yeah, that's my problem. It was like, what even happened? I remember the song. The song was good, but it's just a boring Bond. So
Yeah,
that's why I would say it's not the worst Bond movie. Sorry, the worst Roger Moore Bond movie. But it might be the worst Bond movie, actually, if you don't include the non-Eon ones.
I'll have to watch all the ones again before I make any definitive ones.
I
So
understand that.
yeah.
Um, well, what would you say is next up? Number six.
Next up for me is probably Man with the Golden Gun.
Okay, really?
And yeah, I as much as I really liked Christopher Lee in it, and I remember not liking it as much as I did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember liking it a lot as a kid, but I remember just watching it for the show and being a lot more disappointed in it, like than I remember. Kind of tainted a lot of my original memories of this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
that would be my number six.
My number six is Octopussy. It had some fun bits. I liked it for the most part, but there's just some things in it that I didn't exactly love. So I just put it here. I think the only real bad one to me is For Your Eyes Only. That's the only one that I really wouldn't want to go back to. I think from here on out, it's just like picking like
Sure.
for a little bit, it's like picking like, oh, I have to nitpick to choose which ones go in these spots.
I mean, for me, it's like my top three. Those are the ones that I really like.
Yes, yeah,
I would watch again
I think
and
so. Yeah.
almost right away. And then the other four, they're good, and I would watch them in the future. I would not watch them again though.
Yeah.
Uh, my number five would have to be Octopussy for there.
Okay, yeah.
And again, I remember thinking it was pretty solid, but overall not too memorable.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember liking some aspects of it, but again, I'm really struggling to remember some moments that happened. And there, even though it was only like 2 months ago, I last watched it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, well, I guess my number four,
Or five.
sorry, five. My number five is Moonraker. Moonraker. This one's a fun entry, but this one was like overly camp. I think by the end of it, I was like, oh God, this is getting to be a little too much. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still fine.
That's the thing. Like, that movie is like, if you want to talk about silliest, that's probably like the silliest
Yeah,
Bond
that
movie ever.
one's like so over the top.
Yeah, I could. So if you're talking about View to a Kill, like I don't see how that one's like sillier than Moonraker.
No,
But
I totally agree.
my number four is Moonraker.
Okay, wow.
So uh, I like a little more. I don't. I think it's no secret compared to how my Godzilla tastes pan out. I like a little more camp when my
Hmm.
movies, and this movie delivers from some of that. Yeah, there was some parts in there that wasn't great, but I can definitely remember a lot of stuff that happened in Moonraker and
Hmm.
the stuff with Jaws, even as silly as it was, him finding a girlfriend. That's I still think about those moments a
Yes.
lot.
And she had braces on her teeth, right?
Yeah, and they played the na, 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 na.
So silly. Well, I guess my next choice, my number four, is actually one you ranked a little lower, The Man with the Golden Gun. And I put it a little bit higher because I remember the villain. I remember Christopher Lee pretty strongly, and I remember really liking him. Um, this is the one with the slide whistle stunt, which is a little odd, but I do think there's some really cool stuff going on in here. But yeah, I think it's the same as you. I think my top three are like the ones that I really like. So we'll be moving into like the ones that I start to really like.
Well, yeah, we have the same top three, but well, they may be
Exactly.
in a different order, but the same three movies.
That's true. Yeah.
So my number three was A View to a Kill, the one we just talked about.
I'll just say same here.
uh, it's like I said, very surprising movie in the fact that I was expecting something really bad, but I
Mm-hmm.
was like, this movie's pretty good. So I
Mm-hmm.
just and it's very watchable. Has probably like one of my favorite villains in a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And Christopher Walken. So I would watch this movie again, like pretty soon.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Exactly. View to the Kill actually put a pretty great impression on me. I think this will be one of the more memorable Bond movies. Like I'll think about a lot of the scenes from this one over some other stuff. Really cool set pieces. I really liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So number two is Live and Let Die for me.
That's my number one. So we're opposite here.
We're opposite. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
explain for mine. Live and Let Die. Uh, like probably my first time remembering Roger Moore. Like this is the one I would always associate most with Roger Moore.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
it's tough on any day. Like this, Live and Let Die is. I mean, watching it when we watched it again. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I as much as I love Sean Connery as Bond, like watching this one, it was like really refreshing to see like a different
Yeah.
Bond and to see him doing a very different take on the character. And they tried so many different things that I think worked really. They made a black exploitation Bond movie, and
Yeah.
again, had some of the best henchmen in this movie. They had Teehee and the witch doctor and Whisper. It
Mm-hmm.
very memorable characters in this one, and probably some of the most memorable scenes. Like, and again, made a theme song that almost transcends the series. So,
That's
uh,
true. Yeah.
very, very, very strong contender.
Yeah, and the reason I picked The Spy Who Loved Me at number two, it's just a really solid one for if you like a nice like romance plot with the Bond girl, Barbara Bach playing oh God, what's her name? I think Anya, right?
Yeah, I can't remember,
Yeah,
but yeah,
but she's really good. She's really good, and her and Bond work really well off of each other. And I think Jaws here is better than Jaws in the next movie. I think he's a really good villain here, or henchman here. I love the stuff in the pyramids, the globe trotting in this one. This is one of my favorite Bond movies, and it's really solid.
definitely.
And
And
so you get
that
to piggyback off of that.
right. So that's my number one. That was not my first time seeing Spy Who Loved Me when we watched
Mhm.
it, but I don't know, like just watching it again reminded me, is man, this one's like really good. And it's
Mhm.
just like so like before that we had Roger Moore in Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun. And like I said, he was different in that one than Sean Connery, but I still don't think he really did Bond in his style yet.
Yeah.
And I think this one is the one where it's like this, yeah, he's doing Bond in a completely different way and
Mhm.
it's working, and he's doing what works well for him. Because before it's like they had him doing stuff that Sean Connery would have done in Live and
Mhm.
Let Die, but it wasn't what Roger Moore would necessarily be doing if he as him as Bond. And I
Mhm.
just think he works really well with Barbara Bach. Um, I really like the underwater aesthetics in this movie.
Mhm.
And then you also have Jaws, like you said, who actually plays like an effective villain in this one instead of just like a buffoon in the
Yeah,
other
true.
one.
Mhm.
So I think it works very, very well. There's the fight scene where there's tearing up the truck and all those things. I think they work really well together. And the theme song in this one again is also very high contender for me as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and Live and Let Die. What more can be said that you didn't say? That this is my favorite pick. I think I liked it a little bit better because it just stands out to me as something like completely different because it is a black exploitation movie. And I really love just kind of like the grittiness of it and some of the places that it goes. And I really love the villain here. I think about Yaphet Kotto as Kananga a lot, and I think he's really good. I love his death of him blowing up into like a blimp and dying. I think that's like one of the craziest things we've seen in one of these movies.
Yeah, I mean, it's memorable, but I don't know if that's for the right reasons.
I guess you're right. But it is fun.
I love watching it. Don't get me wrong, but
it's not like amazing,
right? It's not like I would say it was a great death. I'd be like, okay, that was so crazy that it's memorable.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's at least memorable, and it has some fun elements. I love the places that they go to. So I don't know. I remember having a really fun time with that one. And like you said, the theme song, great theme song.
Yeah, it's insane. Like one of the greatest singers of all time to do that song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in your opinion.
Oh, I'm sorry. You loved Lulu a lot.
Yeah, Lulu is one of the best singers of all time.
Well, there you go.
Love Lulu. But I think that wraps it up for now. That was a big mega episode, and we'll move on to another Bond. It's time to talk about Timothy Dalton and his long legendary run next time. Remind us what we're going to be talking about on Thursday, Ryan.
Well, Nathan, like I said, we're going to be doing another monster movie, an alien monster movie, and it's going to be The Mysterians, and that is streaming over on the Criterion channel right now.
Well, awesome. I am excited to watch that. I'm excited to watch that one.
You're so excited.
So excited. Now, I'm excited to watch that one. If you want to email us, you can email us at driveanddoubleFeaturePodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us, or you can X at us at DIDFpod. But until next time.
Until next time.
Reaching